Hello and welcome to the Ask a BA series. In our lesson 5, today we'll be looking at gap analysis. What is gap analysis? A gap analysis is a process which companies use to compare their current performance with their desired expected performance. The analysis is used to determine whether a company is meeting its expectations and using its resources effectively. Gap analysis can also focus on one area of the business, or it can focus on the entire organization. In other words, a gap analysis can be done just for the customer service part of the business, or for the marketing part of the business, or for the IT department, or it could be for the entire organization. Gap analysis also describes the method of assessing the differences between the actual performance and the expected performance in an organization or a business area. The term gap itself refers to the space between where we are now, which is your as if state, and where we want to be. Or put differently, it is the gap, it is the space between where the organization currently is and where they want to get to. In the diagram you see on your screen, you can see the initial state, it is an unsatisfactory state, and the desired state is a happy state. Now, the gap in between is what you mean by gap analysis, the steps you need to take in order to move from the current state to the desired state. And the steps you need to take is what is put together in what we call an action plan. So, how do you actually go about doing a gap analysis? It's quite simple, and we'll look at the following steps. The first thing to do is to identify the current state of that organization or business area. A particular model that is very good for achieving this is called the PUPPET model. And the PUPPET model stands for people, organization, processes, information, and technology. Now, you can begin by working the stakeholders to understand the organization's current performance across these different areas. After identifying the current state, then you move to the future state. So for each puppet area you are considering, identify the expected future state for that area. And then identify the gaps. In other words, identify the difference between the current state and the future state and what the changes are that needs to be done to move from that current state to the future state. And the next thing you have to do now is to bridge the gap. And in bridging the gap, it means initiating a plan of action to implement the changes that you've identified. In other words, if we go over that again, you identify the current state, which is the as if, you identify the future state, you identify the gaps, so the difference between where we are now and where we want to be. And then the plan of action to move from the as if state to the future state. The next slide you see is a sample of a gap analysis template, which you can use to carry out gap analysis. Now, that simple template shows you the category. Remember the puppet we just talked about. In this example, we're looking at three areas of the business: the technology, the people, and the processes. Now, for the technology, we look at the current state. We are saying in this example, the current state the organization is using is word of mouth, local newspaper, and advertisement. The area we're looking at is the advertising platform, which will fall under technology in the puppet model. So the current state is how do they go about doing their advertising at the moment? They use word of mouth, they use local newspaper, and then what is the future state? What is the desired state? The organization would like to go into online advertising, social media advertising. Now, what is the gap between their current state and their future state? What they've discovered is there's a low customer reach. In other words, they cannot reach out to as many customers as they want. And now, what is the corrective action to sort this out. They can correct that gap by creating an e-commerce website. And then what is the desired date when they expect this e-commerce website to be created? In this example, we have the 31st of the 3rd, 2023. So that is an example of how you can do a gap analysis template. So you identify the pulpit area, you identify the current state, the future state, and what needs to be done to achieve that change. If we take a look at the other category, people, we're saying what's the current state? The staff, they are poorly trained and they have low morale. But what is the future desired state? The future desired state is a highly skilled and motivated team. So what is the gap? What is the difference between where they are now and where they want to be? It is insufficient training. And what is the corrective action that can be taken? You upskill the staff by creating an ongoing training program, maybe managed with a learning management system. And you have a due date for that. Same approach follows with the processes. What is the current state of the processes? They've got no documented or standard process. And what is their future state? They want standard processes. So what is the gap? There is no formal tool currently present for creating and managing processes. And what will be your corrective action? It will be you can create and document the current and the future state maps using Visio, or it could be any other tool. Now, this is how you go about using the gap analysis template to identify the gaps within an organization and move from the current state to the future state. In the next slide now, we have a sample gap analysis interview question. And the question is, how can you identify the gaps in the business process using gap analysis? A sample answer here is, you start by identifying the current state of the business, which would include its goals, its objectives, its resources. Then you compare that information with the desired state. You also think about what the company wants to achieve, who will be involved, what resources are needed, and any other relevant factors. And after comparing these two states, you look at the gaps between them and determine if there are major or minor issues and how they can be fixed. Looking at this question and looking at the template we looked at in the previous slide, you can begin to see how you can do a gap analysis for an organization. Why don't you try and answer this question with your own answer, having considered the gap analysis template? Thank you for listening. We will look at another topic in our next session. See you in the next video.